host, Doreen Steenland, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, Dr. Diana Hill. Why don't we just jump in because the phrase psychological flexibility just jumped out at me. So why don't you say more about that?
Yes. Well, psychological flexibility is actually a psychological term that there's been over 1,000 randomized controlled trials looking at it at this point in time. It may be
Uh-huh.
a new term to folks. We've
Yeah.
all heard about resilience and we've heard about
Yeah.
burnout, but psychological flexibility is your ability to stay present,
Mm.
to tune in and be able to be aware of your thoughts and your feelings and everything that's happening inside of you, but also engage in what's most important to you, in your values. And when you are more psychologically flexible, what the research shows is that it decreases your chance of burnout. Psychological flexibility is associated with greater well being, it's associated with greater resilience, better parenting practices, healthier
Yes.
relationships, all sorts of things. And it's been used with a number of different, both psychological concerns, but also with high performers. So they're looking at now psychological flexibility with things like Olympic athletes, training them in these skills. It comes from ACT, which is a approach, acceptance, and commitment therapy, and that's what I get really passionate about is helping people become more psychologically flexible. And we can talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because the healthcare professionals that I see are all high achievers. They are very compassionate people. They care a lot, but they tend to compartmentalize a lot. And I love what you said about learning to be present. Can you say a little bit more about what that looks like in real life for these people?
Yeah, well, there was a really interesting study that was done. It was called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind.
Ooh.
And in this study, they looked at over 5,000 individuals across 88 countries, and they time sampled them. And they asked them three questions. The first question they asked, and people could ask this of themselves right now. The first question they asked is, how happy are you right now on a scale from 0 to 10?
Mhm.
The second question they asked is, what are you doing right now? What activity you're engaging in. And the third question they asked is, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about what you're doing? Are you thinking about something other than what you're doing? And if you're thinking about something else, are you thinking about something positive, negative, or neutral? And
Mm.
what they found is that about half of the time our mind is wandering. This is what our mind tends to do. But
Yes.
for folks that said that they were thinking about something other than what they were doing, they were much less happy. And even if you were thinking about something positive,
Yeah.
you're ironing and you're thinking about your future vacation, that didn't make you any happier than being present in this moment. So we know that being present is associated with happiness and well-being, and there's a lot of research behind that. But
Mhm.
being present is also important for when we're not feeling great. And when you're a healthcare provider and you're facing a stressor, right?
Yeah.
You're facing something like a difficult patient or a difficult moment with a care worker, a
Mhm.
coworker. If you aren't present in that moment, you're actually not going to be able to handle it as well. You're
Yeah.
going to, sort of be caught up in your worries and not be in reality of what's really happening in the here and now. You'd be adding on story to it, which is what we often do.
Yes.
Or you may be tuning out to some important information that your emotions provide, because sometimes the painful stuff that shows up in the present moment is also really also pointing to what's most important to us. And one of the things that you said about like the strivers and high
Yeah.
achievers is that a lot of times what I hear people tell high achievers is, in healthcare providers and myself included in this,
Mm.
is just don't care so much,
Yes.
right? Like, why do you care so much, right?
Yes.
And it's actually that caring that was the reason why you went into this profession in the first place. And
Yes.
when we see people actually detach from what they care about, that detachment is one of the core features of burnout. You start to detach and you start to not care and you become cynical. That's part of getting burned out. So it's not about caring less. It's about what are you doing with that care? And actually, how can you harness, get back into the things that you care about, the values that you care about, and live them out in the present moment, even in a difficult moment. So what that looks like, is you're in a conflict with someone and you care about compassion and you care about perspective taking, can
Mhm.
you stop and get behind their eyes for a moment
Yeah.
and just have pause and like, what is it like to be them? Or can you have compassion for yourself? This is a difficult moment. So
Yeah.
that's the one of the tweaks that I think psychological flexibility offers us, is that I actually want you to care a lot. I don't want you to stop
Yes.
caring.
Yes, because that
Yeah.
is why we all went into medicine, because
Yeah.
we care. We want to help our clients. We want to help our patients. And I think that our country just experienced a taste of what medical professionals go through when we saw that football game this week. And I don't want to focus on it too much, but what I want to bring attention to is it was a medical crisis on national television.
Yeah.
And the nation was really gripped by what they saw.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring attention to all of our medical providers who see these things every day in and day out.
Right.
And we want to help you process these emotions and process what's happening inside of you so you can return to joy quickly. Right.
Mhm.
And it's not about disconnecting, it's about connecting, like you've been saying. And this is a theme in the whole summit. So I'm so excited that you brought up the whole connection piece again.
Yeah.
So what stress do you think these healthcare workers are assuming that they can't do anything about?
Well, when we look at one, we know is that healthcare workers have twice the risk of burnout
Mhm.
than the general population,
Yeah.
right? And when we look at burnout and what some of the research is on burnout, is that there's this really sort of 6 factors that can contribute to burnout.
Mhm.
One of them has to be just like workload, too many demands and not enough resources. And that's a very common experience, right, for
Yeah.
healthcare providers. Like there, I cannot finish my charting. There
Yeah.
is too much to do. It's impossible. And so you feel like you're always underwater, right?
Yes.
Another factor that can contribute to burnout is autonomy, not feeling like you have flexibility or choice at work. Like you can't set limits. You're not, encouraged to have control over what you do and when you do it. Another factor that can contribute is a sense of reward. You don't feel appreciated for what you do. So
Mm.
even you having the summit is a massive, big appreciation.
Yes.
The awareness of, yeah, our healthcare workers are go through this every single day, and they're not being appreciated. And it's not just appreciated financially; it's like recognition
Yeah.
and feeling intrinsically like, wow, you're doing something meaningful.
Yes.
Fourth factor is community. When you are too rushed, you don't connect. You don't have those moments of like, hey, how was your day? How are things going? Because you get into taskmaster mode, right?
Yes.
And having a sense of community, a sense of trust, a sense of belonging. Fairness in the workplace is really important. Feeling like people are there is not discrimination happening. Feeling like you're in a workplace where everyone has an equal chance to benefit here. And then finally, values, which is you feeling aligned with the work that you do. And when those are off balance for folks, which as it can happen for many healthcare providers, it tends to burn out. And that list comes from the research of Christina Maslach at UC Berkeley, who's done decades of research into burnout, and in particular looking at healthcare providers. So what do we do about it? Sometimes it's making a list.
Right.
What is one column? What do I not have control over? And
Yeah.
one column, what do I have control over? And then we do different things. So with the what I don't have control over list, that's not the list to try and take control.
And that's the one we always want to grab hold of, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have control over what this person thinks about me. I don't have control over what's going to happen next in my
Yeah.
day and what crisis is going to walk in the door, right?
Right. Right.
What do we do with the not control list?
Yeah.
That's where we practice things like, can I practice self-compassion?
Mm.
There, like, life is painful and there are hard things about doing what I do. And how am I talking to myself? Am I being self-critical, or am I staying on my own side and being encouraging and having a challenge mindset?
Yeah.
Am I practicing with the not control list acceptance? Can
Yeah.
I let go of my belly a little bit, breathe out a little longer, let my shoulders drop, notice
Mm.
tension in my body, and let go?
Yeah.
Because we control not only with our words and our actions, but also with the tension in our bodies. And you
Yeah.
start to see the impact of that over time. And it also sends signaling to our brain that we're not safe when our body is like this.
Yes.
right? And then we take the what do I have control over list. And what we know from behavioral psychology and decades of research is that actually how you act can impact how you feel. So
Mm.
you do have control over identifying what your values are, what's important to you, what's meaningful to you, and then acting on that value in this moment, whatever moment you are in. So if you value kindness, how can you be kind in this moment? If you value equity and justice, how you can practice that in this moment? If you value creativity, how can you bring more creativity and fun to this moment? And when you start to act on your values and then you practice letting go of what you can't control, then you are doing what we call psychological flexibility. And that does link to, greater resilience and um, ability to navigate stressors. Everything from, folks that were more psychologically flexible, parents during COVID had less spillover effects of the stress onto their families, had less marital discord, all sorts of things. So accepting what you cannot control. This is a, 12-step
Yes.
wisdom. You know the difference. But there's wisdom in that. Accept what you
Yes,
cannot
there is.
control and then change what you can. But the nugget in there is knowing your values and what's important to you. And that takes some exploration of what really matters to me in this moment and using that to be the guide for how you act and the changes that you make in your life.
I love that because I think that as medical professionals, we get caught up in survival mode and we don't take that moment to pause and really ask ourselves, what's important to me right now? And I find that we keep, as we say in positive psychology, positive intelligence, you keep your hand on the hot stove almost. The thing that's bothering you the most, you just bring all of your attention to that instead of what you can control. So it goes right back to what you said, that list. I absolutely love it. So creating the list, knowing your values. What else would you say is an important part of an important focus that these professionals can cling hold?
Yeah. Well, I like the term, I've kind of coined this term of flexible perfectionism, because another thing that you're told when you are a high achiever is don't be such a perfectionist.
Yes.
And let me tell you, if you are a surgeon,
Yeah.
please be a perfectionist.
Yes, please do not stop now.
Please. I appreciate your perfection. That there are places for perfection. There are places for striving. There are places for doing 110%. And then there are other places that are bleeding you dry,
Yeah.
that are dehydrating you because you are being a perfectionist around this is something that I need to hold more loosely and let go of. And getting clear on my perfectionism or my attention to detail is one of my greatest strengths, or my striving is a great strength. But where do I want to put it? During the summer of 2020, I had my own burnout experience, as many people did, and um, I'm a healthcare provider in a different form in that I work with clients. And so it was like one of those, moments where I was seeing clients from my own bedroom and in my bed and, totally
Yes.
burned out, kids, the whole gamut. And I made this list of my own experience of what I was feeling. And the list was signs of inflexible striving. And this list is available to folks. I have a toolkit for strivers that the healthcare professionals can download that'll have like meditations and visualizations and all sorts of stuff. But this list is included. And I would love for folks to check off for themselves, maybe just use your hands, fingers, how many of these you relate to, because it's signs of inflexible striving, which are things like using work to avoid feeling that you aren't good enough, doing more, but never feeling like you're doing enough, starting so many projects that you can't stay focused, or over focusing and neglecting important domains of your life, avoiding taking risks out of fear that you will fail, competing with people who don't have the same goals as you, avoiding taking time off or enjoying your life or resting because you feel guilty, reaching a big achievement only to move on to the next one, never taking in the good of what you've just done,
Mm.
and believing your inner judge is true. And these were the things that I was like, okay, this is, what am I doing that's not working here? And these were the things. And these things are often related to, it's like you're doing the best you can with the messaging that you've been told. right? That if you're feeling bad, just work harder at it, as opposed to actually reverse engineering what is actually workable. And along the way, I made a second list, which were what we could do inside instead. Like, what are the signs of skillful striving or this psychologically flexible striving? And the first one is just being present
Mm,
and engaged in your work. That wandering mind is an unhappy mind. Bring your attention back to this present moment, to your body. Check in. How am I doing in here?
yeah.
When I in. Check out. What's happening in this moment? When I out. The second one was setting goals based on your values. So with high achievers, we often set goals based on what we think looks good, what we think we're going to get praised for, what we think we should do, or A students, all of that. But what about setting goals based on what matters to you?
Mm,
And as opposed to something that someone's going to give you a gold star or a good girl or good boy, for. And then the third aspect of it was flexibly attending to the important domains of your life. So having a understanding of what am I neglecting here? Am I neglecting my relationship? Am I neglecting my physical activity? Am I neglecting my rest? Am I neglecting my fun? And making sure that you flexibly move from one to the other in your life, pausing to take in the good of your achievements, being encouraging, kind, and motivating when you make mistakes, courageously taking risks outside your comfort zone, and setting boundaries and taking time off, even if you feel guilty. That guilt is going to come along for the ride when you set boundaries and you take time off. But that doesn't mean that the guilt decides whether or not you do that. So
wow.
those are my signs of skillful striving. And there's a real different way that you start to feel when you engage in these.
It's so interesting. All of the things that you're saying are powerful. What stood out to me was the whole perfectionism thing, right? We want our physicians, especially our surgeons, to be perfectionists. But what I hear over and over again is that they then bring that home
Yeah.
and start to treat their family like they're puzzle pieces in the OR, right? Moving things around. And so what without compartmentalizing, how can they adjust and adapt to that
Yeah. Yeah.
transition?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. One is that there's no perfection in the realm of the heart.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll tell clients, like, I pity the kid with a perfect parent,
Mm,
because the kid with a perfect parent, when they have an imperfection show up in their life, they're not going to want to go to their parent
yeah.
that's perfect.
Wow.
They're going to want to go to the person that's known imperfection and that's made mistakes and
Wow.
is human, right? So there is no perfection in the realm of the heart or the realm of relationships or the realm of our sort of our psychology aspects of things. And how do we toggle, how do we turn it on when we need it, and then start to look at when it's not useful for us. And the first place that I start to look at is sort of, what are your habits around perfectionism? When does it tend to show up for you in the household that's not working for you, and looking at the consequences. So in behavioral psychology, we look at habits as having a cue, a behavior, and then a reward that keeps it going, right? So in your household, if you notice that when you're feeling irritable, you tend to get more perfectionistic. And then the short term feeling is a sense of control, like, oh, I just like put my kid in their place or my partner in their place, or, was self critical with myself. You may have that short term reward that keeps that habit going, but long term, what are the costs to you?
Yes.
And the long-term costs are really important. Our brain doesn't like to look at long-term costs. It always is looking at short-term in the moment, what
Yes.
feels good, right? But
Immediate.
we have to harness this, frontal lobe to say, no, look a little further down the road here. What are the costs to you of being perfectionist? Is this really working for you in your life? Is this really workable long-term? Is this going to build you the life that you want 10 years down the road? What is the life that you want? What is the relationship that you want to have 10 years down the road? And then what are the behaviors that you would engage in to support that? So we can form a new habit loop. I
Yes.
get irritable, and what do I do instead? I say, I'm really irritable right now. I need to go for a walk. Or I'm really irritable. I would just verbalize that to my partner. I'm just really irritable right now. I'm sorry. I can hear my own voice.
Mm,
And that's where we start to grow, is kind of creating new patterns
Yeah.
of behavior than just our automatic ones. And it's
Mhm.
understandable that's an automatic behavior because it has served you and
Yeah.
it does serve you in certain settings. But we're not so unidimensional. We're complex and we need to allow for complexity in our lives as well.
So what I love about what you said is that this whole autopilot reactions basically happen in your left side of the brain, and what you're talking about really is traveling to the right side of the brain where we can connect with others and actually show up vulnerably in relationship with others,
Yeah.
especially in our household, right? If we can show up as a real person who has real struggles, who doesn't have to show up as a perfectionist, that connects us to our people, right? That makes us a safe place for them to fail and fall and struggle. And so when we show up like that, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So for those perfectionists out there, heed this message because Dr. Hill's got something going here.
There's a lot of fears
Yes.
around showing our vulnerabilities, right?
Yes.
And we fear that if we show our vulnerabilities, someone's going to take advantage of us, or
Mhm.
someone's going to think negatively about us, or someone is going to see our flaws, right?
Yeah.
And that's also where self-compassion comes in as
Mm,
well, because self-compassion is your ability to be with yourself with vulnerability. And if you start there, like,
yeah.
can you be with your own self? Can you be with your own vulnerabilities and
Yeah.
have compassion for yourself? Then you may be able to allow compassion from others in.
Mm,
Compassion is your ability to be present with discomfort and then to do something to alleviate that discomfort. And it has a flow to it. So Paul Gilbert out of the UK, the Compassionate Mind Foundation,
mhm.
talks about compassion flowing three ways. The first way is, do we have compassion for ourselves? When I'm feeling vulnerable, am I able to say, put my hand on my heart and say, oh, this is a hard moment. I'm here for you. Or
Wow.
do I just criticize myself for, my mistake? The second flow is, am I able to show that vulnerability to somebody
Mm,
and receive compassion from them?
yeah.
Give them the gift of giving me compassion, taking it in.
Wow.
And some of our most compassionate people on the planet have a really hard time with that one of
Yes.
receiving. And
Yes.
then the third aspect of compassion is, can I give it to somebody else? Can I notice that somebody else is hurting and can I turn towards them with care? Most healthcare providers are really good at that one. And they're not so great at the first two of self-compassion and
Yes.
receiving compassion. But you
Yes.
know the difference of when you sit down with somebody and you take the time to listen and
Mm,
you pause and you breathe with them and you hear their story, that the course of their health is going to change just from your bedside manner. And we know, physicians and healthcare workers are getting trained in compassion. The same is true for you. So
yeah.
if you allow someone to give that to you, and the only way they're going to give it to you is if you show that you're imperfect, because no one needs to help you if you're perfect.
Yes. Oh, I love this so much because it really gets to the heart of the matter, right? It's about connecting with others. It's about having compassion for yourself and for others and showing up as your real self instead of um, the fake you, right? Which the fake you is the one that has to pretend all the time that they're perfect and not and hide their flaws.
Yeah.
That's not safe for anybody.
Yeah. Well, I will say sometimes it's okay for your fake you to show up.
Mm-hmm. When?
And
When?
well,
Yeah.
when you're in a situation
Yeah.
where some situations it's not a good idea to show a vulnerability.
Yes.
When you're with somebody that is threatening you, when
Yes.
you're with somebody that is in a power position, you
Mm.
may not want to go in and talk about, like how you're going through a breakup with, a
Of
supervisor,
course. Yeah.
if that supervisor has the power to, have consequences on you.
Mhm.
So we it's not, that sort of, and I say fake self, I would say maybe many versions of us.
Yes.
There's a version of us that is sort of like apparent competence. I appear competent, but I'm not feeling it inside. And it's okay for that version to show up, like you could use that version when you're going to visit your in-laws and you just need to like keep it together and not go into anything personal. or you can use it with your supervisor, or you can use it in certain settings, but you don't want to be there all the time. You don't want to be in apparent competence all the time.
Yeah,
You also want to you want to sometimes be in a what Kristen Neff, who's one of the
I love
biggest
her.
researchers. Yeah, she talks about being a compassionate mess. So sometimes you want to be in a compassionate mess place
Yeah.
of just like, I'm a mess and all over the place, and have you do that with people that you know can show up for you. So there is some discernment around where
Yes.
you show vulnerability and where you don't show vulnerability. The same way, it's like flexible vulnerability, like we talk about flexible perfectionism or flexible striving, that you become the designer of how you show up in your life, and you do it based on your values, and you do it based on your awareness of what's happening in this moment and what's best in this moment, the best way for me to show up and be engaged.
Wow. 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 Such good stuff here. Now, if you had to leave us with one tip before we part, what would be your big nugget takeaway for these people today?
Mm. I think my biggest takeaway is just the very simple practice of tuning one eye in
Mm,
from time to time and just asking yourself, what's going on in here? What do I need? What am I feeling? What do I care about?
yeah.
And then tuning one eye out. What's going on around me? What's
Mm,
happening in the world? What is needed from me? And
yeah.
how can I act on that care? And that toggle of one eye in and one eye out. We live so much of our life with two eyes out, or
Yes.
we can get so focused on our two eyes in, we forget to look around at what's actually happening, because there's gifts and gratitude and wonderful things in each and every moment. So if you can toggle one eye in and one eye out, then you get some flexibility with that as well.
I
Realize that
love
we're all
that.
different.
Thank you so much for coming.